clearly something's going on behind the scenes that I don't think that was enough, and obviously a company of that size and of that reputation within the hobby, like if you're the gold standard, you kind of have to move as such. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mints. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking to you about what happens when PSA stops grading. Just recent news. It's pretty big news for the hobby. We're going to go over how we feel about it, what we feel, how this is going to affect the hobby going forward, and what we think could be done to maybe curb what caused PSA to stop taking submissions. But before we get into that, if you could please be sure, as always, to subscribe if you aren't already. Rate, review if you can. That really does help us out a whole lot. We appreciate everybody that has rated and reviewed the podcast. It really does mean a lot with our numbers. This helps us really grow the podcast, shows our legitimacy and that people are actually listening, which seeing the numbers, you are. So we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you lending us your ears once a week. And without further ado, let's get into it, man. All right, so if you're in the hobby or if you know anything about sports cards, you know that PSA, which is pretty much the gold standard for grading when it comes to sports cards, they made the decision to pause taking grading submissions for pretty much all of the levels besides Express, which is like really, really high end, and walk-in or walk-through, which those services are $300 and $500. So you can kind of get an idea of everything else is just stopped right now. So what I want to do is I kind of want to start the podcast really with explaining the details that we know so far, just in case you aren't aware of them, just in case you didn't read the statement. But these are kind of a few of the talking points that I took from the actual statements from both the CEO and owner of PSA, as well as the PSA PR team. So effective March 30th, PSA temporarily is suspending their value, regular, and express service levels. That's not Super Express that I just mentioned. They said they're going to take a tiered approach to reintroducing these service levels, and their goal is to bring those service levels back by July 1st of this year. They also said that PSA is working on the physical office space, so they're expanding their office facility. That's kind of what their goal is. I guess it didn't happen fast enough to prevent this from happening, from them having to shut down. But they're also creating office expansions internationally, which is kind of a big deal because PSA hasn't really had an option overseas when it comes to grading. So the UK is going to be pretty happy about that. Australia, if that's where they go. But that'll make collecting a lot better and grading for international collectors. And for the first time, they're actually going to start new grading locations in the United States. So that will really help with the submissions from across the country. Like maybe this can splitting them up, you know what I mean? Hopefully can maybe alleviate and balance out the amount of orders that they get. So that's kind of the facts, or I guess the statements that we have from PSA regarding their decision to pause grading. But I think what they wanted to convey to the hobby and people that are interested in grading cards is the reason why they had to shut down, which I think it's cool. I think it's great that PSA is being transparent. I think that you should be. They haven't always been the most transparent in the past, so this is a good first step. But they said that PSA was receiving more cards every 5 days recently. So that's about 500,000 cards per business week. And that's what PSA was used to receiving every 3 months. So they were getting, within 5 days, the amount of card submissions that they had been previously receiving in 3 months. That's crazy, right?
That's nuts, man. I mean, bottom line is, there might be a few play moves involved, or, PSA has bigger things in mind, but I think that they were honestly just overwhelmed with the pandemic and more people grading cards. Yeah, I think it just got a little bit too overwhelming, man.
Yeah. I mean, we sent in our cards this past summer. We only got, out of the 5 orders that we've shipped within the last year, which 4 of those were actually sent over the summer, so like July-ish, August, and we've only gotten 1 of those back. And I know that there's people that have other submissions out there that definitely haven't gotten those back from before we even sent in. So, and that was months ago, man.
Yeah, and the example is, do you remember even before the pandemic? I remember sending cards off to PSA, and you knew you were going to be waiting quite a while, a few months, whatever it may be, especially for a bulk order. But yeah, that slowly but surely became more a longer wait period, which sucks, So it's like people have been sending in a PSA for a while, dealing with this frustration, and then PSA comes out with this news. Probably pisses some people off, but again, you got to understand that bottom line is they are probably overwhelmed, and they have other things probably that they're planning to make happen to grow their business, which makes sense.
Right. And I believe that in that same statement that they said that I think that they like doubled their employees since last January, which is good. Clearly something's going on behind the scenes that I don't think that was enough, and obviously a company of that size and of that reputation within the hobby, like if you're the gold standard, you kind of have to move as such.
Yeah, and again, trying to do that within the pandemic happening too, because you got to think that you're getting a lot of different cards, so you're going to have a bigger staff to be able to fulfill these orders. But you had outbreaks here and there possibly. I don't really
Right.
know for sure, but you can only imagine, why they just kind of had to say, hey, we're going to put a stop to this. We need to reevaluate what we're doing. We're going to come back stronger, bigger. And people are going to wait that. PSA is going to still be the go-to for sure, I think. I know you agree as well.
Right. And that kind of ties into one of the subtopics that I wanted to talk about on this episode is, what does PSA pausing, they didn't all downright stop. They're not going to stop grading permanently. I don't think that they could. They'd lose what they've created over the past however many years they've been open. But the subtopic that I wanted to speak to you about, and I wanted to really get your take on, was, what does this mean for the hobby over the next like 3 to 6 months, maybe even a year? Because they do say July 1st is when they're going to start, starting to slowly introduce the grading levels again that were suspended. But if PSA is telling me July, I'm going to plan for December. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. That's true, man.
So what do you think is going to happen over the course of the next few? Like, what is your initial take as far as what you see this means for the hobby?
Well, this is one thing that we talked about before, we had mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, is that this may force people to stop sending in those $5 to $10 cards in bulk, man. Like $105 cards. Which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But you see the services that they're currently offering. You're going to have to pay a super high premium if you really want something graded by PSA. So that forces people to only focus on basically sending in case hits. We have a lot of stuff we're sitting on right now. And can you even really think of something that you are just dying to spend that kind of money on to get graded right now?
Honestly, man, I'm thinking of it now, and I don't really think that I have anything that I would be willing to send in and spend $300 for the Super Express, or even $500. I have some early year Messis that I'm dying to get graded. That's for sure.
Yep.
I have some 2004 Ronaldo cards that I'm dying to get in that are definitely worth grading and grade worthy. I think that they might 9, but I don't really justify just throwing away $300.
I know.
If I can just be patient, and yeah, maybe it's not going to be the $20 or $25 that they were charging right before they decided to do this maybe it's $50, but $50 is way different than $300. Like that just cuts into a huge chunk of your profit.
I agree. I think patience is key, such as with anything in life, but especially when it comes to learning about the hobby, hoping for a return on an investment. I think the bottom line is that we have cards right now that probably are worth grading right now, or even for PC purposes or, investment purposes or whatever. But I think that the way that I'm looking at it, and I think that other people are going to turn to, is instead of considering even spending 300 or 500 to grade a card right now, why not pick up cards that are already graded for that, or less, or buy more product, open more product, and just save up for, whenever you do decide to send back, or PSA opens back up and we can send to them, on a regular submission. I think that that's going to be the move. It's going to be individual. I know there's still going to be people that are getting case hits and grading with PSA. It's not like PSA is going to completely fade away. Those big breakers, people that do a lot with PSA, they're going to still be sending in those high dollar cards for sure.
Right.
I mean, if you pulled like a Zion Gold or something of some product, you would then consider sending it to PSA probably because it'd be worth it. But
for sure,
still, there's other ways I think that people are going to look into spending that money in general, or they may just save. I mean, maybe this forces more people to just break out boxes and start really digging through some singles and just prepping. I know that you and I had talked earlier about, a box that we have just sitting of cards and stuff that you haven't even gone through yet, that you've been picking up over the last couple months. It's going to be the perfect time for you to, over this span of time, go through that stuff and then just be ready.
Right. And again, these were all cards that I was picking up raw. Some actually GMA slabs, even some BGS slabs that I wanted to crack and resub.
And you haven't cracked those yet, right?
No, I didn't, thankfully. But just a box of cards that I had been picking up, and because I had been kind of switching my investment strategy to older cards, because at the time I wasn't really interested in paying for the ultra modern fee. I know it was only $5 more, but again, $5 extra per card, that adds up if you're sending in a lot of cards.
Yeah.
But now I think my strategy is just going to be, I'm only sending in cards that I will do research and compare to graded examples and say, and just really, I know nobody can really predict what grade you're going to get, but I'm going to really, really focus on only sending in cards that have little, like almost no flaws.
Yeah, unless it's an older card, you had talked
Exactly.
about Messi's and stuff. I mean, that kind of stuff is just worth getting graded.
That's great no matter what.
Yeah, but the ultra modern stuff, I mean, realistically, I think this whole thing just is really going to force people to be a little bit more selective and almost tasteful as far as what they're going to send in.
Right.
Realistically.
And I think the investor in me is kind of, I wouldn't say freaking out a little bit, but we've seen the returns that we've had with our grading, even just getting our first grading submission back that we did together as raw mints, our bulk submission back. And the returns that I've made on that first order of cards, because they did 9 and 10, that's a huge chunk. And obviously, if you're getting in this to invest, you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. PSA could shut down, the market could crash. You have to now, with PSA forcing a shutdown, well, actually us as collectors and investors forcing a shutdown, because this is half PSA's fault and half our fault. If we're going to hold PSA accountable for getting behind and creating a huge backlog, we also have to hold ourselves as collectors and hobbyists accountable as well, because we're the ones that sent in all of those cards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as collectors, as members of this community, as frustrating as it is, and as we have been over the past year with the grading times taking so long, I think we have to do what I'm assuming PSA is doing right now, and that's reevaluating their position, reevaluating what they need to do, what they need to focus on, getting rid of any sort of distractions or things that maybe they were working on that need to take a back seat. I think we need to do what they're doing and kind of reevaluate why we are collecting, why we are in the hobby. Because if you're in the hobby to send in 300 base cards and make a flip, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. there's nothing wrong with making money if you have those options. If you have those cards to send in that people are interested in and that people are going to buy easily. Like it's not really a tough science to understand. As collectors, we have to go back to evaluating why we're in the hobby. And if it's to collect, then it's to collect. Like I said, we've been fine with waiting this past year. Yeah, it's not been fun, but we've dealt with it because we weren't banking on those cards.
And we're still collecting and investing. As frustrating as this whole thing is, I just think that it could do some good for the hobby, because people buy packs and they see something, they're like, oh, that's a 10, oh, that's a 9. I mean, what about just opening the pack and appreciating the cards, the photography? And this may not happen, but that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I just hope that it encourages more people to, if they're going to open packs or open boxes, if you can get them at affordable prices, of course, but enjoy the actual card, figure out what's your favorite sets, build sets, stuff like that, or spend time. If you're that pissed off about PSA, you can still find a bunch of PSA cards on eBay or at shows. Take advantage of being able to pick these cards up, because the hype for PSA is going to be back and prices are going to, I don't think, a separate thing. Do you see PSA slabs decreasing in price at all because of this?
Decreasing?
Or holding even or improving? Where do you see them sitting right now?
That's kind of tough, man, because it's so recent, I personally don't know what is going to happen with PSA prices because, if they had paused grading submissions and stopped grading and there wasn't a backlog, like maybe there was just something going on with PSA and they needed to stop, and there wasn't a backlog that they have millions of cards sitting waiting to be graded, then I would see the PSA prices skyrocketing because there's not going to be any new, especially ultra modern cards within the last year hitting the market. So those ultra modern cards are going to would see a spike if we knew that there's not millions of cards waiting at PSA to be graded. Like that's when I would think PSA, the value of PSA slabs in general would increase. But because knowing that whatever anybody started picking up on or starting to get into because of not only investing or accounts saying go pick up all of these, or people, Gary Vee saying this or that about who to pick up, I think that those cards are obviously going to continue to be in circulation because, again, like I said, there's millions of cards being waited to be graded. And over the course of the next 5 to 6 months, we're going to see all those cards hit the market. Now,
yeah,
if they do clear that backlog and for whatever reason it takes them longer to maybe hire more staff or build facilities or expand facilities, and then they have to just completely shut down for even a month, I think, of them knowing, which I don't think they'd ever say that their backlog is clear because then people would get really pissed. But even if they shut down for a month, dude, like I would see PSA prices skyrocketing because people would panic buy and people would be selling to those panic buyers.
Yeah, I see that.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
But who do you think is going to benefit the most from this? Like, do you think that wax is going to be more sought after because people are chasing bigger hits to send in for grading? Do you think like breakers are going to see a huge boom in new business because people are still chasing that high of hitting something big, and now they know that they're not just going to be sending in a bunch of base James Wiseman cards in? Now they need to hit a silver or they need to hit a numbered card,
Yeah, and that's something I was going to bring up too. First, going into like more people getting into wax, ultimately people should be getting into wax, but it's so expensive and hard to obtain. That's one of the biggest things that irritate me in the hobby, is especially for kids trying to get into hobby open packs. I mean, I got to experience that. And you got to experience that to an extent, even when we were ripping cello packs of 2019 Prism was Zion's rookie year. Mm-hmm. I remember we were ripping those at your apartment, and those were still fairly hard to come by, but we would be able to go hit up a couple Walmarts and at least find like a couple packs or whatever. Like now that's just not happening.
No.
The biggest thing now is it's like, I feel like you are going to see people still sending in base Prism LaMelo Ball rookies, paying
Right.
$300 to get them graded. And because people are actually doing that and putting those in the pop report, there's going to be a premium for people that want to buy those, especially
That's
if they're
true.
PSA 10. But do you only, if you're even focusing on Wiseman or some of the other guys, Anthony Edwards, I feel like we would pull again like a gold or like a really low numbered, parallel of some sort. That would be worth, yeah, paying the money. But at the same time, if you pull that or have that, why not just sit on it, move on to the next thing? PSA is going to be back unless you take a chance into getting into other, another grading company or whatever. But for those people that are just waiting for PSA, just be patient. Patience is key
Right.
for this and holding on to those cards because eventually you will be able to send them in. But I do see that happening, and I know that you can see that too, where people are just sending in base cards still, paying that premium for LaMelo Ball. That's the main guy I see. People still spending that premium to get cards graded. I don't think that's going to benefit the hobby realistically. I think
Hmm.
that it's just gonna create it's not really overrated, but I think it's just gonna the prices are gonna be so crazy, and they'll cool down like everything else. But it's still a very new hot product. But that's something that I hope not to see too much of, but I'm afraid that we probably will. If it's a blue fast break LaMelo Ball or like a really sick parallel, I mean, yeah, that might be worth sending the money in, especially for those people flipping. But there's a lot of people that are going to be capitalizing on those base cards and getting premiums for those PSA 10s, and that'll be the thing whether those really hold their value once PSA is back and up and running regular, and you're getting more people sending in these cards, and you have a bigger pop report of that base card. I don't know. It's hard to say whether it's going to benefit it or it's going to be a negative thing for the hobby. I think that we're just encouraging people to be patient, try to dabble into other ways of collecting. The investment's always going to be there, especially for base cards, but I think that if you have the patience and wait on it, you'll see it's better to see players pan out. That's the way that I look at it.
And I think personally, me, from my standpoint, I know that we share similar strategies and investing strategies when it comes to the hobby. But one of my main things that I've been practicing lately, and we've talked about on previous episodes, is I benefit from day trading. I benefit from players having a good performance. If I have graded cards, if I have graded copies, just like Erling Haaland and Mbappe, if they go off and I have multiples of them, I'm going to let go of one of those and cash in on their performance. And either I save that money for personal reasons or personal things that I want to save for, or I reinvest and get something that I really want. I think that that's one thing that kind of, I wouldn't say it hurts me, but it kind of bums me out a little bit because I was doing that lately. I've been doing that for the past month or so with our cards that we got back from grading. I had a lot of multiples that I had sent in, and I've been selling a few here and there for a pretty high dollar and reinvesting that into graded card that I really wanted. And obviously I can still do that. I still have a lot of slabs, and don't get me wrong, we have quite a bit. We've probably got about, again, like I said, reevaluate where you fit into the problem, and we've got about 800 cards out for grading right now that are sitting at PSA, just for full transparency, and to acknowledge that, yeah, we can be pissed like, oh, about the boom and oh, it's changing the hobby, but we also did send in a lot of cards, so we're part of the reason why PSA shut down.
And sitting on a lot of raw cards too that haven't been evaluated for grading, or maybe they're just to help, make some of that money back for grading costs. It's a lot.
Right. And if the prices go up, we're going to use that money to pay for the grading costs. But that's kind of one of the things that I was kind of bummed out whenever I found out that they're going to be shutting down is I started picking up, and I kind of changed my investing strategy to pick up older second, third year, fourth year Leo Messi cards, and I only have like 3 or 4 early year cards, which they're big cards, but 3 or 4 early year Messi cards graded right now in my possession. But I've got I've got about 40 or 50 raw cards from his first few years that are waiting to be graded. And I just really wanted those mostly for PC.
And it was the cheaper approach to getting these older Messi cards too. That's what
Exactly.
sucks.
Because I'm not going to, because even the same cards that I have in raw right now that I got for what, 30, $50, even like a PSA 6 is going for $300, $400. So it's like,
Yeah.
I'd much rather get more raw cards than sending them in for grading. But again, we have to kind of adjust our strategies, you know, and Messi isn't going anywhere. Ronaldo isn't going anywhere. That's a topic for another episode. Goats only is our new motto.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to be aware that these goats, these huge players that are already established, that have already won championships, have won rings, have won MVPs, have been standout players, all-stars their whole career, those are the ones you're going to want to bet on even more now than ever. Because if PSA shuts down, as they did, and you're sitting on a bunch of raw cards of these players, even if they're not parallels or rare cards, keep sitting on them. Like, that's the reason why you picked up these established players.
Yeah, and again, maybe also forcing people to, because it's really tough when you're buying older cards. Even you picking up these older Messis, it's really a gamble on your end, because I'm sure you're messaging asking for, you know, the best pictures possible just so you can actually look at the card front and back just to see what you're buying. But when buying older cards, especially getting into vintage, it's really hard to buy stuff raw, because especially most of the people are buying these cards online, so you don't know if you're getting something that's tampered with, or it's just really hard to know the condition unless you're able to see it in person. So being that PSA is kind of on hold right now, this could also be an opportunity for people to just pick up older cards that are already graded and authenticated. I don't know if you'll see much of a price decrease that way. A lot of vintage has been going up, especially for football. I mean, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice rookie cards. I mean, even buying these cards raw is going up in value, let alone graded. But in turnaround, I mean, if you have a moment to just sit on the cards that you have, prep them, get ready, know that you have cards that are going to be ready to be graded, possibly returns on your investment, you might be able to spend a little bit of money and just for the time being pick up some older cards that are already graded, authenticated. Because these are the cards that we talk about GOATs, players that are established. More and more of these players are getting recognized. And obviously, the graded cards are always going to hold the higher premium for the most part. So this might be a way of people to just practice their grading techniques, sit on the cards that are getting ready to be graded, and just pick up some already graded stuff for the time being if you can. Because again, it's fun to open wax and, you know, be able to pull these cards that you want to grade, but I just don't see the prices of wax really going down at all unless they create more and more product, which there's already enough of. I mean, wouldn't you say there's already an abundance of modern, ultra modern products right now?
I would totally agree with that. That's kind of another kind of question that I wanted to ask you is, do you think that Topps and Panini capitalize on the lack of grading? I know that people like to come up with a lot of conspiracy theories with everybody's in cahoots and everybody's just trying to make more money when it comes to PSA and the card companies and all that stuff, which who knows, it could be true. But do you see Topps and Panini putting out more product, or maybe even doing higher print runs of product, or keeping those machines running? Because there's going what we think, I mean, do you think there's going to be a higher demand for wax for people to be chasing bigger hits? Do you think that Topps and Panini capitalizes on that need in the market?
I just think there's already so much product out there, man. I don't necessarily think that they need to create new products, but the market's gonna plateau at some point to an extent where, like, because anything, I mean, especially when you're trying to shop retail anymore, it's like everything is out of reach anymore. I mean, we're talking like base tops, you know, just the most basic products that realistically, it's not like everything is super short printed in it. You have flagship rookies, like especially with baseball and Topps Update, Topps Series 2, you have certain chase cards, which are usually flagship rookies. And there are the short printed parallels, but realistically, all this stuff, there's an abundance of it. There shouldn't be, where you have to pay even $30-$40 for a top Series 1 blaster. You should be able to get that at cost.
Right.
I just think that with the hype of how everything went in the market, that's gonna have to stop at some point. At least I hope it does. There's always gonna be big cards that are worth value, but I don't think it's really necessarily Topps and Panini grading companies. Obviously, the market is as big as it is, so they're all connected in some way. They have certain agreements. Same things with the difference between Topps and Panini. How Topps doesn't own the license with NFL or NBA right now.
Right.
I think that maybe it's going to take some sort of a merging project where we get Bowman Chrome for basketball again. We get Topps Chrome for NFL again. Maybe something like that, which is going to be huge. It's going to be huge for the market, but maybe that is going to, help solidify it a little bit more to bring people into really knowing, I don't know, maybe not getting things at the most affordable cost, but I don't know. I just think that there's too much hype. There's no reason why Illusions basketball should be so expensive.
Right.
Or like a retail exclusive, retail only product. I don't know. It just kind of turns me off. And that's why, again, we focus on mainly picking up players that are more established or just things that we like. And it's kind of a turnoff. I feel like it was cool trying to make some money on wax and retail for a while. Everybody has done it. People still do it. But it's really just, it's not good for the hobby. I don't know. It's hard to say. I just feel like the market in general is going to plateau at some point. And right. It's going to change things a lot for people that are not only collecting, but people that are just only in this for making money. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I could see a lot of casual collectors / investors just quitting while they're ahead. But I could also see, we both know people that spend a lot of money ripping wax and it doesn't matter the product just because of that feeling of the chase, which is another part of the hobby that I love ripping wax. I love getting big hits in cards, but I'm 31 years old. I'm not going to be spending $500, $800, $1,200 on a hobby box for the chance that I hit a big card. I'd much rather spend $300, $500 on a graded card of a player that's really good or a player that I really like. The gambling aspect of it, which I've never seen Panini and Topps come out with any sort of statement or any sort of warning video that their products are causing, these types of addictions to spending habits are getting messed up, like I'm being serious. Like,
yeah, but it's gambling. I mean, it's just like going to the casino or something like that. I mean, you have the right to gamble if you want to.
And we're of age and we're adults, but what about the kids? Yeah. What about kids that are getting into it,
Well, and that's, for people that are listening, I feel like it's also our duty not to burst your bubble, but to know that if you are able to get like a new Prism basketball box, and they're expensive, and if you're able to get one even at like a decent price, just know that it's really tough to get what you paid for that box.
In value.
Yeah, and our strategy because of that is if you are willing to spend $2,000 on a box, let's even say $500 on a box, which is still a lot of money.
Right.
You may spend $500 on a box and you're hoping to pull whoever the rookie is that year. You can turn around and why not just spend a couple $100s on that card or to an extent. I mean, you can still spend your money wisely. Part of it is the chase. It's fun of trying to pull the superfractors, the low numbered parallels, stuff like that. But realistically, it's really hard to do that. And unless you have that kind of budget to gamble with, you can still spend a fraction of that price and at least pick up some cards of the key players of the sets.
Like guarantee that you're getting a hit.
In the long run, that should, be a better return on your investment. Or, it's just not easy for the kids. It's unfortunate. You bring that up, and that was the fun thing is even it doesn't matter if it's about money. It's, we're from Arizona. It's cool to see kids come to a card show and they just want Diamondbacks players or Cardinals players. That kind of stuff should still be alive in the hobby. It shouldn't just be about picking up the hottest players or prospects right now.
And again, I think that kind of drives our main point that I made earlier even further is reevaluate what the hobby means to you and how you want to proceed going forward. That's a great example to say, okay, you could spend $500 on a hobby box and not hit anything, or you could spend $300 and get a parallel, even say a LaMelo ball. You can get a parallel LaMelo ball for 300, $400. If that's what you're chasing, obviously you're not going to get. I understand the aspect of opening wax, and I understand the importance of doing that in the hobby. But for people that maybe shouldn't be spending that money on a hobby box and rolling the dice, you're not going to get a LaMelo ball 1 of 1 or even a 10 or probably even a numbered card for less than $500 right now. But you could still get an orange parallel. You can get an orange ice. You can get these other maybe retail parallels that we all know the premium that just a parallel holds compared to a base card. I mean, right now, with the state of PSA being closed, you probably aren't going to want to spend that $500 on 3 or 4 base cards. You're going to want to spend that all on one card, which, again, we got to reevaluate what we're doing and why we're doing it. If you're in this to invest, fine. We invest. I make quite a big chunk of money off of this hobby, and I'm thankful for it, and I'm glad that it's gotten me to this point. But like we've said in prior episodes, I like to reinvest in something that I really like. I'm not going to reinvest all of it. Sometimes I do if I sell a big card and just swap it for a big card. But I just think that we all need to just kind of just take a deep breath and realize that PSA isn't going anywhere. The world is not burning. There's much bigger issues in the world right now than PSA being shut down, so we can give them a little slack. But we also need to assess where we stand and what we want to do going forward as collectors. And I think that this really falls on our shoulders. If we don't like how things are going with PSA, or if we don't like how things are going with other grading companies, or how Panini works, or how Topps operates, then we need to make a conscious decision as collectors to kind of teach them how we want to be treated, you know?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of collectors that have been around for a while, you included, and a lot of people that hate the prices being so high on these products and blame flippers, blame breakers and all these things, but the prices wouldn't be so high if we weren't paying them.
No, that's true. I mean, it's a business for sure. It's unfortunate the way that it is, and I feel like another tough thing is we're telling people instead of paying these premiums for boxes to spend $100. It's hard to imagine for a lot of people, and I know even yourself when you first got into this. But the thought of spending $100 for a single card, you weren't feeling that at all, right?
No, not at all.
You weren't at first. No, yeah,
I didn't understand
that's understandable. But again, what we're saying is you could spend $500 on a hobby box, and honestly, you're lucky if you even get $100 value back from that box. So it just depends on what your budget is, how you're trying to gamble, because honestly, even those people, I've heard this from, we talk about Peter from Showtime, but in Tempe, he sees guys come in, they buy cases. I mean, they have a budget that they can buy a case of a product, and then they'll hit him up and be like, hey, I didn't get anything. Like those, I don't even know what they spent, but maybe their case hit was a Sean Murphy bunting or, something like that. I mean, for real. I mean, that could very well be the case, and that's what sucks. So you just got to choose how you want to invest that way. You want to spend $1,000 and potentially make half of that back, or you could by far past that and make thousands, or take a lower gamble on somebody that you have faith in. Especially most people that are into cards, they understand sports to an extent. There are people getting in just for the money, but that's not going to pan out for those people in the long run. That's going to plateau. These flippers with retail products, I don't know how. I can't say how it will, but that's going to end at some point, or the value is going to decrease. It's right. Really going to be about people using their brains to collect more, or just have faith in not only the cards but the products. Because it's hard to say Prism, is not gonna decrease in value. People are smart to hold, hobby boxes of Prism, even LaMelo Ball's rookie year.
Right.
Because holding those sealed products, yeah, 5-10 years down the line, I mean, who knows what those prices could reach. But again,
Right.
it's really just thinking of strategizing, figuring out what you want to do, especially if you're big on grading right now or you don't know where to go. I mean, now's your time to really reevaluate and consider where you see the hobby going. And we're just kind of relaying a few topics that we think are probable, I guess.
You make good points, man. You do. And again, we'll say this a million times more. Collect what and who you love, and you won't go wrong. You just won't. If that's just at the core, if you sit back and you reevaluate where you stand and take a look at how you've been in the hobby and what you want to do going forward, it's gonna all tie back to who do you collect and why.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, then you have that PC aspect. I mean, I'm sitting on several Sam Darnold slabs and nice parallels raw, and I mean, he's actually getting traded.
Yeah, he got traded, man.
This
Never
upcoming
know.
season, he might do well, but still, it's like I was more fortunate when it came to Josh Allen, because Josh Allen, his prices really did see a huge increase, and I made some good sales on that. I kept a few things that I liked, but then there's Sam Darnold sitting in the background, and
Right.
that may pay off. And if it doesn't, I still have some cool cards of Sam Darnold, I guess, and a PSA 5 or 6 select
Some
card
serial
too.
numbered cards too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a few of the things that I wrote down. I want to know how you feel about it, and I'd honestly like to know how everybody else feels about it that's listening. If you are listening to this and you are agreeing or disagreeing with our takes, that's what this podcast is for.
Yeah, continue to reach out to us,
Right.
please.
If you want to add anything, or if you want us to cover more of this subject, I know we're going kind of long right now, just kind of reach out and we'll address it on the podcast straight up. Like, we're pretty transparent about it. But these are a few of kind of what I think are the best case scenario or solutions to prevent PSA shutting down again, because we all know, I mean, I have I have a box of cards that I need to go through and prep for grading, that once they open up, and once PC Sports Cards, shout out to them, shout out to Josh Cohen and his team. I hope they're doing well through all of this. I'm sure they're getting a nice little vacation right now, not having to look at cards and open boxes all day. So shout out to them for taking good care of us in the hobby. But these are a few of the solutions that I kind of know your quick thoughts on, and I want to know what everybody else in the hobby that's listening to this feels about too. So these would be what I think my solutions that could fix the backlog issue going forward. More PSA grading staff. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. More people, it's gonna cut down times. It's gonna help with dealing with the backlog. Bigger facilities. If there's millions of cards waiting, they got to be. I don't want my cards to be stored sloppily. If they're getting graded at PSA, that needs to be climate controlled. It needs to make sure it's not exposed to the elements. And obviously that costs a lot of money for PSA. So bigger facilities are a good thing. So if we have to wait to get that done, as long as they're holding our collectibles, that really means a lot to us. So that could be a solution. Higher bulk pricing, higher prices for group subbers. If SGC 3x'd their cost of grading bulk cards, I don't see why PSA wouldn't either. I'd pay $75 through PSA. I'm not paying that through SGC. Limiting the number of orders submitted, both personally with people that have accounts through PSA, as well as group subbers, which I'm thinking that could be a possible solution. More transparent service levels. So if they come back in July or whenever that day is, they say, okay, look, you want that $25 per card price? This is how long it's going to take. If you want $25 per card, it's going to take a year and a half. It's going to take 18 months. Are you okay with that? Fine. I know that we kind of are, but if you're okay with that, then cool, you're all gravy. If you're not, then I don't think that it's going to work in the hobby if that's your goal. That would still support collectors and long-term investors if it was a $25 18-month waiting period. Like I just said, we've got cards of players that aren't going anywhere, that are already in the history books. So what's 18 months? It's only going to go up in value, actually. And then my last kind of point is, does this fall on us as collectors in the hobby? What happens through our actions? So only sending in valuable cards, parallels, rare cards, and serial numbered cards, like being more responsible with what we're sending in. Not sending 300 base cards, sending in 10 to 25 serial numbered cards or rare parallels or short prints. So what do you feel about those solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been talking about this kind of stuff for a while. I agree with it. And one thing I know we talked about before, like with SGC, it's like a lot of people, PSA is tops, and even Beckett is tops. I like SGC. I know we've talked about SGC before. I think they're a reputable grading company. The thing that I thought that maybe they would take advantage of it and say, hey, we know PSA is everybody's top preference. Why don't we give some certain bulk submission price or whatever the cost may be, and try to get more people interested. If they would have dropped their prices a little bit or even kept them the same, maybe, I don't know, maybe there would have been more people turning to SGC as well, which is something that I thought about. I know Beckett is still, their wait times have been pretty crazy for a while. I think those are all really good points. Biggest thing again is I feel like it's just going to really make people reevaluate what they're sending in, which is important. It needs to happen. When it comes to like rookie cards, I mean, base rookie cards that are $5 to $10, it's good to get those graded, because if you have faith in a certain player or prospect, you think they're going to pan out, prices will increase. But if you're sending in multiples of just star cards or whatever, I mean, I think it just gets a little bit excessive. So I think that this should tone down where people are as far as sending in cards. But yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think that these are solutions that could help curb the hobby in which direction it needs to go. I just wonder what it's going to do with wax prices, what people are really going to do. Like I said, people are still going to pay a premium sending in base LaMelo Ball cards, and that's just the hype that we can't seem to get rid of right now. I hope that we fall back to a place where people are really focusing on the all-around aspect of it, not just what's ultra modern, what's ultra hot. Let's talk more about players that have some accomplishments or have been producing in some ways, even if they're not playing for a really good team. I wish to see more people focus on that kind of a thing.
Good, man. Good. I think that we could talk about this topic for hours, man, but we'll definitely
Those are all good points, though. Those are good points, and I hope more people will elaborate with us as far as if they agree with that, if there's any other points that people think that could be made on that subject. Please reach out to us, because we're curious about it as well, what it's going to do, and it's kind of put us at a stunt here where we are just going to wait it out patiently on everything that we have, and we're just going to invest on goats only is kind of what we're going with right now. But
for sure,
there's more time to get into the hobby aspect.
For sure. All right, guys. So we actually started a new segment that we're going to start doing every week on the podcast. It's called Ask the Hobby. So what we're going to do is we reach out to other collectors on social media, mainly IG, that we follow or that we come across, and we just ask them a question. It can be any question. It doesn't have to pertain to the specific podcast episode. And we have them respond, and we listen to their response, and then we kind of give our feedback on their response and what we feel. So our first question for Ask the Hobby comes from Carlos, actually, another Carlos, from Dose Collectibles. That's Dose, DOSE _ collectibles on Instagram. Make sure to give him a follow. He's got a really interesting page. This was our question for Dose Collectibles. As a collector returning to the hobby, how do you feel about the current state of the hobby compared to how it was whenever you left? What is the overall vibe of the hobby now, and is it a positive or negative? So here's his response.
Hey, what's up, guys? First, let me say thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, as a collector coming back to the hobby, the state of it now, I mean, it's hard to say. It's a whole different environment. from when I was a kid, I mean, my mom could drop me off at the card shop. I could walk in there and pretty much browse around and pick any kind of card I wanted, or any pack for that matter. But nowadays, trying to find any kind of retail in the stores is just impossible. Whether it's positive or negative, I mean, I think it's both. I think it all depends on where you stand. There are those who definitely are taking advantage of the market right now, and I can't really hate on them, but it does make it difficult for for the collectors like myself to try to find anything in the stores, or even for the kids, not this generation. I mean, they're not going to get to enjoy those times like we did when we were kids. I used to collect Marvel back in the day, the 95, 96 Fleer X-Men cards. And yeah, I mean, it was good times back then, but you can trade with your friends. But nowadays it's just a whole nother beast. A lot of investor type mentalities, which I understand, take advantage of the market. But like I said, the overall hobby itself is just, I don't even know if it's a hobby anymore. I mean, it's more of an investment opportunity. I think people look at it nowadays. But for those of us who are still trying to keep the hobby alive, I think it's very important for us to try to, I don't know, maintain the values of what we had as kids, and to try to share that with the new generation that are coming into this, and allow them to enjoy the same things that we got to enjoy. Thanks for having me on, guys, and appreciate all you guys do.
Great response, man. I think that that ties into what we spoke about on this episode. Is just like you've been a lifelong collector. I've been collecting for about a year and a half now, and I really like that he said maintaining those values that we had as kids, or you had as a kid. Like, how do you feel about that?
I think Carlos hit that right on the head, man. I mean, thank you for that answer on that, man. I think that what he said, especially that being a really positive and negative thing at the same time, that's absolutely correct, because the positive way to look at it is, because of all this, more and more people have been getting into the hobby. But at the same time, most of the kids, new people getting into the hobby, these products are so unobtainable, so expensive. So that is, I agree with that 100%. It's hard to say where it's going to go. I think that as long as we encourage people to collect and not just focus on the monetary value of things, I believe there's still collectors out there. I believe that people that are just getting into this hobby can still find ways to collect and not just be focusing on that monetary value. And you have collectors like myself and Carlos, and you, Carlos.
Yeah.
Because you fell into both worlds. You found out what it was like to get into the hobby and make money off of it, and also appreciate the cards that you have. PC cards, your personal collection cards, players that you just respect, or players that you think are going to pan out in the long run, that you don't mind sitting on and having, again, patience. I think that that's very important. But yeah, I think that, he made a great point there, and I agree with that 100%. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I think that, again, thanks again for your response on that question. It's nice to hear from a returning collector, somebody that collected whenever they were younger and for whatever reason stopped collecting, and now they're getting back into it. It's very different from, I'm sure, whenever he stopped collecting before, like you just said, and what he said mostly was the prices, like the even availability of getting it in retail. And if you can't get it in retail and you go to a local card shop, if you even have a local card shop, you're going to be paying so much more than what you should have even 2 years ago.
Yeah, you didn't used to have to. I mean, you could have got a hobby box for $120, maybe even let's say $300 a box, man.
Right.
Which was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money, but it just gives you more. You feel more comfortable about making a purchase and gambling on something, as opposed to spending thousands. It kind of takes the fun out of it, and puts it in a hard spot for moms or dads taking their kids to the store and they want to pick out a box of cards. That's $20. It's relatively affordable for a parent to buy their kid or whatever, and it's just not, you can't even find these products anymore. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Thanks again for that response, man. We really appreciate your time, taking the time to answer that question that we had for you. I think it really does help any new collector. I'm sure a lot of the collectors returning to the hobby feel the exact same way you do, man. I think we all do agree that the high prices of wax and sealed products is just not attainable for a lot of people. including us. I'm not paying that money, man. Like again, like we've said before, if we're collectors, we should be focusing on picking up those singles or graded copies of cards, and just kind of put that chase of opening wax on hold right now, even though that's one of the most fun things to do. I really enjoy opening product, but I think the collectors will always find their way to continue to collect, and those high prices are going to be for the new people or the people that like to chase things, and that's their lane. But as collectors, I think Dose Collectibles does a really good job as well. He does a really good job of being a true collector, man, and so shout out to you. All right, so let's get into our pickups and flips of the week. We're actually going to start with the flips of the week and then get into the pickups after. So what would be your flip of the week, Bruce?
My flip of the week correlates with my pickup of the week. I got my hands on a few hangers of the new Prism basketball. Got them at a store. Actually, our friend Ryan got us a few boxes.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan, man.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan for sure, because we didn't have to pay those crazy prices just to rip a couple of hangers for fun. Ended up pulling a orange ice LaMelo ball, which I immediately saw it, knew it was a big card. Made a deal with a friend, got it sold. Didn't even care about the condition. Obviously, it wasn't notably flawed or anything other than the centering being off, but made an offer on it and sold it. And I ended up using that to turn around and put it into an investment on a pickup.
How much did you sell the LaMelo for?
The LaMelo sold for $400.
Nice.
Raw, which is crazy. But I mean, again, people are gambling on the LaMelo ball, which is understandable if that's your thing.
Right on. So my flip of the week is going to be a 2018 Panini Revolution Trae Young PSA 10 that I actually got. I picked it up raw about a year ago for about $5 on eBay. Got it graded, it jammed, and I sold it for $180. So that's a pretty sizable flip. I think Trae Young's prices are pretty low right now. It's actually a pretty good time to pick him up.
Yeah.
It should have sold for way more, but yeah, that's my flip, man. So getting back to how your flip turns into a pickup, let's take a second to talk about your dope pickup, man.
So my flip turning into a pickup. Sold the LaMelo ball for $400. I have, like I said, I've been a Roberto Clemente collector for a while because of my grandpa, and he'll be excited when I get this card in. I'm can't wait to show it to him. But finally, one of the cards that we needed to complete all of his years from 55 to 73, picked up a second year, 1956 Roberto Clemente. This is in an SGC 5, an older label too, which I actually appreciate the older label a little bit more. I was able to go through the seller off of eBay, a private sale. We basically agreed on $600. So when I think about it, I sold a LaMelo ball for $400 and essentially paid $200 for a second year Roberto Clemente in a grade 5, which I know PSA 5s of this are probably somewhere around $1,000. This is one of those things that when it comes to vintage especially, I appreciate SGC. I know they've been doing it for a while. And to find this card in the older label, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. So that's to me, that's a huge pickup.
Congrats, man. I know you've been wanting that for such a long time. Such a huge pickup, dude. I'm like super stoked for you to get that in hand.
Yeah.
But congrats on that pickup, man.
For sure. We'll definitely be sharing that one to the page at some point.
100%.
Too. Yeah. What about you?
So my pickup is actually not even a sports card, man. My pickup of the week is I picked up a 1977 Star Wars number 254 Darth Vader PSA 7 on eBay.
Which is basically like a Darth Vader rookie card, right?
Pretty much, man. Pretty much. That Wookiee rookie.
Yeah.
I picked that up on eBay for $65, man. Not a bad pickup at all. It's a PSA 7. I didn't pick this up. I'm not picking this up for any sort of investment purposes, although if it skyrockets for whatever reason, then I will consider flipping. But yeah, man, it's a really cool card. The green border is pretty sick. You should look it up.
Yeah, it's an oddball pickup.
But yeah,
That's
man,
awesome.
PSA 7, it's a pretty sick card. It's dope. It's tops too, by the way.
And Star Wars isn't going anywhere either. I mean, the market is going to continue to be as strong as ever. I mean, it always has been, kind of like sports cards. So something to note there.
For sure. So those are our pickups and flips of the week. All right, man. So do you think that I know we went a little long about the PSA shutting down topic, but do you think that wraps up the episode for today? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that sums it up. I just again encourage people to keep their options open and just practice patience, just like you do with anything in life. Sports card market should not be any different. There's always going to be room to get in. Cardboard is always replaceable. It's going to sell high, it's going to sell low. You just got to get in where you can.
Collect what you love. So we really hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you got some information that you may not have known about. If you already knew about it and you wanted to hear our take, we appreciate you for listening. Again, as always, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review. Helps us a lot. Helps us get the word out about the pod. And also be sure to follow us if you aren't already on Instagram at Raw Mints. That's where you can find us. We post daily content to the page. A lot of informative stuff on there. Some fun stuff. We share our personal collection weekly. Usually it's a different sport every week, so you should definitely check that out. Shout out again to Dose Collectibles for answering our question for our Ask the Hobby segment. And yeah, I think that's about it. So this has been another episode of Wax Talk with Raw Mints. I'm Carlos.
And I'm Bruce.
Thank you for listening.